Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jessie and today we are doing my first mini wrap-up of July. So these are the 5 most recent books I have read in the month of July. So without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it. The first book I finished in July was Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. I was supposed to read this last month from my Roll the Dice game, but unfortunately I wasn't able to finish it last month, so I did finish it this month, and this was not for me, unfortunately. The premise behind it sounded really intriguing. So essentially it follows these 3 main characters, one of which is a prince, one of which is a girl who has the whispers of gods in her ears, and then one of them is a monster. When I say monster, I mean like a human boy who acts like a monster. I thought this had a lot of potential, and I had heard it described as a very dark kind of fantasy, so I was really excited because I like dark, kind of more gritty fantasy stories. And unfortunately, that's really not what I got from this book. It is a Russian-inspired fantasy world that felt very reminiscent of like the Grisha-verse by Leigh Bardugo. So that was kind of nice to see because I did really like some of the world building that occurred in this book. But in terms of characters, I really just didn't care. I didn't care about any of the characters. Nadia, our main character, who had the whispers of gods in her ear, I really thought that idea was so cool. Like, this one girl's chosen and is able to speak with the gods, but it was touched on so little in this book. Like, there's only like very few scenes where she actually does interact with the gods, which I found so bizarre because that was the thing I was like really looking forward to about this book, was this whole relationship between like humans and gods, and I just love those types of themes explored in fantasy. So unfortunately, this didn't work for me. I did end up giving it a 2.5 stars. It just wasn't dark enough. I didn't care about any of the characters. I just did not like the romance at all. Magic system, while I think that was probably the strongest part of this book, it just didn't do enough to like wow me. I've been having a lot of trouble with young adult fantasy in general this year. If it's going to be described as a dark fantasy, I want it to go there. Like, I want it to make its characters evil, and while this got close, it just wasn't enough to satisfy me. And yeah, I'm super bummed. I'm super bummed because I know that this had mixed reviews anyway. A lot of people really don't like this book. A lot of people love it. And just for me, I'm gonna be in that camp of people who just don't love it. It was more of just like a very meh kind of feeling at the end of this book where I just really didn't care. And to be honest with you, I was really confused at the end. Like, some of the visuals and the fight scenes and such were, in my opinion, described in such a way where I didn't connect with any of those scenes at all. So, bummer. Anyways, that's Wicked Saints. I won't be continuing on with the series. The next book I finished was Wild Seed by Octavia Butler. This is my first Octavia Butler book, and if you don't know what Wild Seed is about, it is about these 2 ancient beings, one of which is named Doro, and he is over 3,000 years old, and he has the ability to occupy other people's bodies to continue living. So when he gets to a point in his current body where he can no longer live, it's too old or whatever the case may be, he just goes to the next person and occupies their body and thereby killing them. Then there's this other ancient being called Anyanwu, who's not quite as old as Doro, but she has a healing ability and she also has immortality, so she never dies. Doro meets Anyanwu at the very beginning of this story and offers her a proposition where she may have the ability to have children who can also live forever. And Doro essentially is this breeder where he's trying to find these people with these extraordinary abilities and breed them so that they create more extraordinary people with stronger abilities for future generations to come. It's really fascinating stuff, and I was so unbelievably impressed with the premise behind this, how unique this story felt, the concept behind it, and the themes it explored through that concept. It was just really, really fascinating stuff. And we kind of follow these two beings from, I think, the years 1690 until like the late 1800s. So you're spanning a long time throughout this book, and you kind of grow with the characters and see the world grow with them and how it changes. Nyanwu is also a shapeshifter, so she was naturally born as a black woman, but she's able to shapeshift into different animals and change her appearance at will. So it's really interesting also exploring the themes of identity in this book. Where it fell a little bit flat for me was just feeling a little bit too removed from the characters themselves. Their story, while it was so fascinating to follow, I never felt fully invested in their story, and Octavia Butler's writing is beautiful. Like, I definitely am a big fan of her style in general. I just wasn't totally invested in the characters themselves, but I was invested in the story. So I think this book really, really took an amazing concept, a very unique concept that I've never read about, and executed it really well. I just wish I had felt a little bit more something for the characters. So I'm definitely going to continue on with this series, because if I understand it correctly, she actually published Wild Seed after the original series, and this was meant to be more of a prequel to the Patternist series. Knowing that, it makes more sense why she presented the characters in the way she did, because we're just being introduced to them and figuring out how they got to where they were. And now I'm really curious to continue on with the series and see how these characters play a role in a bigger story. Overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really do recommend it. It's a really, really interesting, innovative science fiction novel, but I just wanted a little more from the characters. Next book I read was Anyone by Charles Soule. This book follows a really fascinating concept of taking a technology and using it to transfer your own consciousness into someone else's body, and how society would take that technology and mass produce it. And this also explores a lot of really fascinating themes, where it's like you can no longer judge someone based on their appearance, because the soul inside of them may not be the one that was actually born to that body. It was really fascinating stuff. So I loved the ideas behind it, the technology behind it. I really liked exploring how society would use this and how people would benefit from it. Like, one of the uses for this when it was mass produced for society was the ability for very rich people to occupy like a celebrity's body for a day and like live like someone else for a day. It was really interesting. However, where this fell flat for me was, again, characters. I just didn't care. And I would also say that it got really confusing at some points. Like the timelines, there's kind of 2 separate timelines where we're following the scientists who figured out this technology, and then we're following the future where the technology is mass produced. But they flip-flop timelines so often that it starts off very jarring and confusing to follow all the different timelines and where the different pieces of the narrative fit within the timeline. And I didn't think that was totally necessary to tell it in that way. It just kind of added unnecessary confusion, in my opinion. And then I also just think there were maybe a little bit too many perspectives in this. I don't think we needed to follow as many people as we did. But other than that, I did enjoy like the themes and the plot and all of that. So I gave this book 3 stars, but again, I think it would have been higher if it just hadn't been so confusing. Like, for a lot of this book, I was very confused. I definitely think this is one that would benefit from a reread. I will consider doing that in the future for sure. The next book I read was The Vanishing Season by Hutchison, which is the last book in the Collector series. That series is a thriller series that follows a group of FBI agents as they take on different cases. The first being The Butterfly Garden in this series, and I loved that book. That's why I wanted to continue on with this series. This, for me, was one of the weaker stories. I'm going to hold them all up here because I want to mention, I really, really highly recommend you check out The Butterfly Garden if very, very disturbing content doesn't bother you. The Butterfly Garden and the third book in this series, The Summer Children, are excellent. I really, really enjoyed both of these. They were both 4 stars. And then The Roses of May, the second book in this series, I did not like this one at all. It was 2 stars. And then The Vanishing Season, unfortunately, was 2.5 stars. The reason being, there wasn't any mystery in this book. Like, we figured out who our culprit was very early on in the book, and it focused a lot on the characters, like the FBI agents' personal life and their relationship, and I just didn't care about that stuff. Like, I wanted more of them trying to crack the case. I wanted more of the mystery and thriller aspects. I just didn't care about the character's personal life. I didn't want that to be the focus of the story, and unfortunately that was a huge focus of this story. I was very confused by that, so I just didn't really get what I wanted out of this book. It's not bad by any means, it's just not what I wanted from this thriller series, but I do still recommend you check out Butterfly Garden and Summer Children if you're looking for some very, very dark, heavy thrillers that are very messed up, but are still really good. Then the most recent book I finished, I saved the best for last, and it's why I'm wearing my Clever Girl shirt. It was Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. Full disclosure, Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is like my whole childhood wrapped into one movie. I loved that movie growing up. So I have a very, very biased view towards Jurassic Park in general, and I went into this book knowing I would probably love it. I did. I gave Jurassic Park 5 stars, easy. The first thing that surprised me, and I was really intimidated to read Jurassic Park because I just didn't know if I would connect with the writing style. And luckily, Michael Crichton's writing style is very, very straightforward, to the point. It never slows down in pace. It's like boom, boom, boom. He doesn't waste any time getting to the point. So it's super fast-paced, very easy writing style to get into. So that's one thing that I absolutely loved about this book, is how easy it was to just binge it. The next is the actual story. I think that this is one of the most brilliant ideas I have ever come across. This whole idea of making the science behind resurrecting extinct animals sound so real, and just the whole concept in general. Again, I'm biased, but I just think it's the coolest thing ever. So I loved it. I appreciated it so much, reading how cool this would be if we could actually do this and how scary it would be. And then the themes, it was really, really fascinating and eye-opening, and just I think that this would spark a lot of really fascinating discussion around science and nature and the natural order of things and how humans are impacting the planet, and all of that is explored within this book, and it's so fascinating. I loved it. And then all the characters. Ian Malcolm is one of the greatest characters. I loved him. Dr. Grant, I loved Dr. Grant. I can't choose a favorite between the movie and the books because I love them both so much. I will say the book went into much more detail and included so much more. The fun dinosaur scenes that you loved from the movie, there's so many more in the book. So I can see if you had read the book before watching the movie, I can see you being very disappointed in the movie because they had to cut out so much that was in the book. But the stuff that they included in the movie that was also in the book is so good. So I can't recommend this enough, especially if you've watched Jurassic Park in the past and you're a fan at all. You gotta read this book. It's so easy to get through. It's like a 450-page book, but you could read it so quickly because of the writing style. So I loved it. 5 stars. Yes! So those are the 5 most recent books I have read. Did you see any that you really enjoyed or that you didn't like? Let me know in the comments down below. I love chatting with you guys about books. At the end of all of my videos, I want to make sure to do Booktuber shoutouts from here on out. That has been something that my Discord server have been talking a lot about, is sharing Booktuber accounts that we probably wouldn't find otherwise, or that would be very hard to find because of YouTube's insane algorithm. So today's Booktuber shoutout is going to go to Booked and Busy. I love her channel. I'm so glad I found it because she has such awesome sci-fi and fantasy recommendations. She is reading all of the top fantasy books, all of the top sci-fi books. She has made me want to read Robin Hobb so badly. So if you're looking for awesome sci-fi and fantasy recs, check out Booked and Busy. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And until next time, bye!